My husband kept joking that if my best friend ever gave him a chance, he'd leave me for her. I should have realized sooner he wasn't joking. I should have known. My marriage was doomed the moment my husband made that joke for the first time. You know, the kind of joke everyone laughs at because it's just uncomfortable enough that pretending it's funny is easier than calling it out. The first time he said it, we were sitting around my kitchen table eating takeout. My husband Mark had his arm slung casually across the back of my chair, and my best friend Jenna was across from us scrolling through her phone. Mark looked at her and said completely casually, "Honestly, Jenna, if you ever gave me a shot, I'd probably leave my wife." Everyone laughed. Even me, because what else are you supposed to do when your husband casually says something like that in front of your best friend? Jenna rolled her eyes dramatically and tossed a fry at him. "In your dreams," she said. Mark laughed like it was the funniest thing in the world. "Hey, I'm just being honest." Then he squeezed my shoulder like that was supposed to make it better. "Relax, babe, I'm kidding." And technically, he said it like a joke, but something about it sat in my chest like a rock. You know how sometimes a comment just lingers? That one did. But I brushed it off. Because Mark had always had a weird sense of humor. And Jenna had been my best friend since we were 15. 15. We'd been through everything together. High school drama, college breakups, terrible haircuts. Her crying on my couch when her ex cheated on her. Me crying in her car when my first serious boyfriend dumped me. She was basically family. Which is why when she hugged me at my wedding and whispered, "I'm so happy for you," I believed her. And when she became friends with Mark after we got married, it seemed normal. Of course, my husband and my best friend would get along. At first, it actually felt perfect. The three of us hung out all the time. Game nights, brunch, movie marathons. Jenna would come over after work and collapse dramatically onto our couch. "Your husband better have wine," she'd say. Mark would shout from the kitchen, "Only for my favorite person!" And Jenna would shout back, "Oh, you do care!" Then she'd look at me and grin. "Don't worry, I'll give him back later." Again. Everyone laughed. Looking back, the jokes were constant. Little comments that made me uncomfortable for half a second before everyone moved on. Like the time Jenna showed up wearing a tight red dress before we went out to dinner. Mark literally stopped mid-sentence and stared. "Wow," Jenna spun dramatically. "Too much?" Mark shook his head. "Nope, if I wasn't married, I'd be in trouble tonight." Then he winked at me like I was supposed to be amused. I remember forcing a smile. "Good thing you are married." "Yeah," he said. "But I can still appreciate art." Jenna laughed. "Your wife is right here, you idiot." But she was smiling too. And that weird tight feeling crept back into my chest. Still, I told myself I was overthinking it. Because Mark always reassured me. Every time I brought it up. Every single time. One night, I finally said something while we were getting ready for bed. "You joke about Jenna a lot." Mark looked confused. "What?" "You always say stuff about leaving me for her." He laughed. Actually laughed. "Oh my god, you're jealous?" "I'm not jealous." "You're jealous." "I'm not." He wrapped his arms around me and kissed my forehead. "Babe, Jenna is like a sister." That stupid sentence. "Relax, I'm kidding when I say that stuff." Then he added, "You know you're the one I married." I remember feeling embarrassed for even bringing it up. Like I was being insecure, so I dropped it. And things went back to normal. Except the jokes didn't stop. They actually got worse. At a friend's birthday party a few months later, someone asked how Mark and I met. Before I could answer, he said, "Well, technically I met Jenna first." I blinked. "No, you didn't." He grinned. "Emotionally, I did." Everyone laughed again. Jenna shoved him. "Stop it!" But she was blushing, and something in my stomach twisted. Then there was the beach trip. That was the moment I should have paid attention. We rented a house with a group of friends for a weekend. The first night we were all drinking on the deck watching the sunset. Jenna was sitting on the railing with her legs swinging, and Mark kept handing her drinks. At one point, someone joked, "Mark, you're treating Jenna better than your wife." Without missing a beat, he said, "Well, if she ever gave me a chance, I'd have to." More laughter. Someone said, "Dude, you're gonna get divorced." Mark shrugged. "Worth it." I laughed with everyone else, but inside something cracked. Because this time Jenna didn't roll her eyes. She just smirked. Later that night, I asked Mark again, "Why do you keep saying that stuff?" He groaned like I was being ridiculous. "Because it's funny." "It's not funny. It's literally a joke. It makes me uncomfortable." He sighed dramatically. "You know Jenna would never go for me, right?" That sentence was meant to reassure me. But it did the opposite. Because suddenly the problem wasn't Mark wanting Jenna. The problem was Jenna not wanting Mark. And for the first time, I wondered what would happen if she did. I pushed the thought away. Because Jenna was my best friend. She'd never do that to me. Right? Right? For a while, things settled down. Life went back to normal. Mark worked long hours. Jenna started coming over less because she said she was busy with work. Nothing seemed suspicious. Nothing seemed wrong. Until the night I noticed the texting. It was small. Stupid even. Mark was sitting next to me on the couch scrolling through his phone. He laughed quietly. I glanced over. Something funny? Just a meme. But then his phone buzzed again. And I saw the name on the screen. Jenna. I felt that rock drop into my stomach again. "Why are you two texting?" He shrugged. "She sent me something." "Why didn't she send it to me?" He hesitated. "Just for a second." "Because you're sitting next to me." That explanation technically made sense. But it didn't feel right. Then his phone buzzed again. And this time he angled the screen away from me. That moment, that tiny movement, was the moment everything started falling apart. I didn't say anything. I just watched him. And for the first time in our entire relationship, I had a horrible feeling. Because suddenly all those jokes didn't feel like jokes anymore. They felt like warnings. And the worst part? A small voice in the back of my head whispered something I didn't want to admit. Maybe he'd never been joking at all. And I had no idea yet just how right that voice was. Because 3 weeks later, I walked into a restaurant I wasn't supposed to be at. And saw something that destroyed my marriage. But the crazy part? That betrayal was only the beginning of the story. 3 weeks after I saw Jenna's name pop up on Mark's phone, I found out exactly how wrong everything had been. And the worst part? I wasn't even supposed to be there. The night started completely normal. Mark told me he had to stay late at work because his team was crunching numbers for a deadline. That wasn't unusual. Mark worked in finance. And there were plenty of nights where he didn't get home until 9 or 10. Jenna had also been weirdly busy lately. Every time I texted her about hanging out, she had some excuse. Work stuff. Helping my cousin. Family dinner. At first I didn't question it. But the text between her and Mark never stopped. I noticed it more and more. Sometimes his phone would buzz and he'd glance down, then immediately flip the screen over. Other times he'd smirk at something and type quickly. One night I jokingly said, "If you two text anymore, you might as well start your own group chat without me." Mark didn't laugh. He just said, "You're being weird lately." So I dropped it again. That night, though, my coworker Lisa invited me out for dinner after work. "We're celebrating," she said. "Celebrating what?" I asked. "I survived the worst client meeting of my life." That seemed like a fair reason. We ended up going to a little Italian restaurant downtown. It wasn't fancy, but it was cozy and always packed. The place had this warm yellow lighting and small round tables pushed close together. Lisa and I were halfway through a basket of garlic bread when she excused herself to the bathroom. I sat there scrolling through my phone, completely normal, completely unaware that my life was about to implode. I remember looking up when the door chimed. I didn't think anything of it at first. Then I saw Jenna. My brain took a second to process it. She was dressed up, more dressed up than usual. Black heels. Tight black dress, hair done. For a second I thought maybe she was meeting someone. Then I saw the person behind her. Mark, my husband. He was smiling. That same smile he used to give me when we first started dating. And they walked in together. Not awkwardly. Not like two people who just happened to arrive at the same time. They walked in like a couple. Close. Comfortable. Mark's hand briefly rested on the small of Jenna's, back as they moved toward a table. My heart dropped straight into my stomach. I remember staring at them, trying to convince myself I was misunderstanding something. Maybe they ran into each other here. Maybe they were meeting other friends. Maybe. Then they sat down at a tiny table for two. Just the two of them. And Jenna reached across the table and touched his hand. Not casually, intimately. Like it was normal. Like it had been normal for a while. I couldn't breathe. My brain kept repeating the same sentence. No, no, no. Then Mark laughed at something she said. And he leaned forward. And kissed her. Not a quick peck. A real kiss. Right there in the middle of the restaurant. Everything inside me went cold. For a second I honestly thought I might throw up. Lisa came back from the bathroom just as I was staring at them like I'd seen a ghost. "Hey, are you—" She stopped when she followed my line of sight. Her eyes widened. Oh, my God. That's when the shock wore off. And the anger kicked in. Before Lisa could stop me, I stood up. My chair scraped loudly across the floor. I don't even remember walking across the restaurant. But suddenly I was standing at their table. And they both looked up. Jenna's face drained of color so fast it was almost impressive. Mark just froze. For a full 3 seconds, none of us spoke. Then I said the only thing my brain could produce. "What the hell is this?" Jenna immediately pulled her hand away from his. "Wait." Mark stood up quickly. "Babe? Don't call me that." My voice came out shaking. "Explain." Neither of them spoke. They just stared at me like two kids who got caught stealing. Finally, Jenna said weakly, "It's not what it looks like." I laughed. Actually laughed. "You're on a date with my husband." Mark rubbed his face. "Okay, look." "No," I snapped. "You look." People around us had started staring. A couple at the next table was openly watching the whole thing. "Are you sleeping with her?" I asked. Silence. That silence was my answer. I turned to Jenna. My best friend. Her eyes filled with tears. It wasn't supposed to happen like this. I felt something inside my chest collapse. How was it supposed to happen? More silence. Then Mark said something that made everything worse. "We didn't want to hurt you." The audacity of that sentence was unbelievable. "You're literally cheating on me." "It's complicated." "No," I said. "It's really not." Jenna tried to grab my arm. "Please let me explain." I jerked away from her. "Don't touch me." Her lips started trembling. "I didn't mean for this to happen." "You didn't mean for it?" I repeated. "You accidentally fell onto my husband?" Mark sighed like he was the one dealing with something exhausting. "We were going to tell you." "When?" "Soon." "Before or after you slept together?" He didn't answer, which was answer enough. I felt tears burning behind my eyes, but I refused to let them fall. Instead, I looked directly at Jenna. "How long?" She looked down. Jenna. "Of 3 months." 3 months. 3 months of jokes. 3 months of secret texting. 3 months of them sneaking around behind my back. "You're unbelievable," I whispered. Mark stepped forward like he wanted to calm me down. "Can we talk about this privately?" I looked around the restaurant. "Why, embarrassed?" His jaw tightened. "Don't make a scene." I laughed again. "You're on a date with your wife's best friend and you're worried about a scene?" Jenna started crying. "I'm so sorry." "You should be." Mark said something then that I will never forget. Look, this just kind of happened. Like it was weather, like it was an accident, like they slipped and fell into a relationship. I stared at both of them. Then I said quietly, "You know what the funniest part is?" Neither of them spoke. "You used to joke about leaving me for her." Mark looked uncomfortable. "It was a joke." I nodded slowly. "Yeah." I grabbed my purse. "Turns out you weren't joking after all." Then I walked out of the restaurant. I don't remember the drive home. I barely remember getting inside the house. I just remember sitting on the couch staring at the wall for what felt like hours. Eventually, Mark came home. He walked in cautiously like he expected me to start screaming. Instead, I just looked at him. "Are you leaving me?" He hesitated. That hesitation told me everything. Then he said the words that shattered the last piece of my marriage. "I think I'm in love with Jenna." The room went completely silent. I felt something inside me break in a way I can't even describe. But instead of screaming, instead of crying, I just nodded. "Okay." Mark looked surprised. "That's it?" "Yeah." "You're not going to yell?" "No." Because in that moment something changed inside me. The sadness was still there. The betrayal was still there. But underneath it, something colder had started forming. And Mark didn't notice it. Neither did Jenna. They thought the story ended there. They thought they had won. They had absolutely no idea. They had just started the biggest mistake of their lives. Because 6 months later, I would be standing at an altar again. And Jenna would be sitting in the front row, watching me marry her father. And that's when the real chaos started. When Mark told me he thought he was in love with Jenna, I expected a lot of things. Begging. Guilt. Maybe even regret. What I didn't expect was how quickly he decided to move on. The next morning he packed a suitcase. Not a full move out. "Just a few things? I think it would be better if I stayed somewhere else for a while," he said carefully, like he was explaining something reasonable to a child. I was sitting at the kitchen counter, staring at a mug of coffee that had gone cold. "Where?" I asked. He hesitated. Then he said it. "Jenna's place." The words felt like someone punched me straight in the chest. I nodded slowly. "Of course." He shifted awkwardly. "Look, this isn't how I wanted things to happen." I didn't look at him. "You mean getting caught?" "That's not what I meant." "Right." He walked over like he wanted to hug me. I leaned away before he could touch me. That seemed to finally make it real for him. He grabbed his suitcase and headed for the door. Before leaving, he turned around. "I hope someday you understand." Understand. Like this was some tragic love story and I was just the unfortunate side character. I watched him walk out of the house we bought together. And that was the moment I realized something. Mark genuinely believed he was the victim. The next few weeks proved it. Because the story they started telling people was fascinating. According to Mark and Jenna, our marriage had been falling apart for a long time. Apparently we had been unhappy. Apparently Jenna and Mark had developed feelings accidentally. Apparently I was taking the divorce really badly. That last one was my favorite. Because I hadn't actually done anything yet. But rumors spread fast. Mutual friends started acting weird. Some people stopped inviting me to things. One of Mark's friends actually had the nerve to tell me, "You can't control who people fall in love with." I remember staring at him like he'd grown a second head. "You're defending my husband cheating on me with my best friend." He shrugged awkwardly. "They didn't plan it." Right, just like Mark said. It just happened. Meanwhile, Mark and Jenna weren't even trying to hide their relationship anymore. 2 weeks after he moved out, Jenna posted a photo on Instagram. The picture showed her sitting on a beach chair with a drink in her hand. Mark was next to her with his arm around her shoulders. The caption said, "Sometimes life surprises you with the love you didn't expect." I stared at that post for a long time. Hundreds of people had liked it. Some of them were mutual friends. Some of them were people who had been at my wedding. One comment said, "Finally! We all saw this coming." Another said, "You two are perfect together." Perfect. My best friend and my husband. Perfect. I should have been furious. I should have been screaming. But by that point, something strange had happened to me. The anger had turned into something else. Something quieter. Colder. Because every time I saw one of their posts, every time I heard one of the rumors they were spreading, I started paying attention. Not emotionally. Strategically. You see, Mark had always assumed I didn't care much about money, which was ironic. Because I actually handled most of our finances. He made more than me, but I paid the bills. Tracked our accounts, handled the mortgage, investments, everything. Mark hated paperwork. He trusted me with all of it. And apparently, he forgot about that. The first real confrontation happened about a month later. Mark came to the house to talk about the divorce. He walked in like he still belonged there. Like nothing had changed. "Nice place," he said casually. I raised an eyebrow. "You mean our house?" "Well, technically." I folded my arms. "What do you want, Mark?" He sat down at the kitchen table. "I think we should keep this amicable." I almost laughed. "You cheated on me with my best friend." He sighed. "You keep saying it like that." "Because that's what happened." He rubbed his temples. "I just don't want this to get messy." I leaned against the counter. "Messy for who?" "For both of us." "No," I said calmly. "Pretty sure it's already messy." He ignored that. "Jenna and I are serious." That sentence made my stomach twist, but I kept my face neutral. "Oh? Yeah. We're thinking about moving in together officially." I smiled slightly. "That was fast." He shrugged. "When you know, you know." That line was so cliché it almost made me laugh. Then he got to the point. "I think we should sell the house." I shook my head. "No." His expression tightened. "It's the easiest option. I like this house. Well, I don't want to keep paying for it." "You moved out." You're still living here. Yes. So sell it. No. He stared at me for a long moment. Then he leaned forward. Look, I don't want to fight about assets. That word caught my attention. Assets. You mean the assets I manage? I asked. His face flickered slightly. Yeah, those. Interesting. He didn't actually know much about our finances. Not in detail. Because for years he'd just trusted me. Don't worry, I said sweetly. We'll figure everything out. He seemed relieved. Good. Then he said something incredibly stupid. Honestly, I just want to move forward with my life. I nodded slowly. Oh, you will. At the time, Mark thought that conversation meant I was going to make the divorce easy. He told Jenna that later. I know because one of our mutual friends told me. Apparently, Jenna said something like, see, I told you she'd calm down eventually. Calm down. That phrase stuck with me. Because they truly believed I would just accept everything. They thought I'd cry for a while. Maybe date someone new eventually. Move on. What they didn't realize was that I had already started moving on. In a way they never saw coming. And the person who unknowingly started that chain reaction was Jenna's father. The first time we talked after the breakup was actually by accident. It happened at Jenna's parents' house, a place I had been hundreds of times. A place where I had spent holidays, birthdays, random Sunday dinners. Jenna's family had always treated me like one of their own. So when her mother called me 2 months after everything happened, I almost didn't answer. But curiosity got the better of me. Hello? Her voice sounded hesitant. Sweetheart. I'm so sorry. That one sentence broke something in my chest. Because for the first time since everything happened, someone sounded genuinely ashamed. I didn't raise my daughter to do this, she said quietly. I didn't know what to say. Then she asked something unexpected. Would you come by for dinner? I hesitated. That might be awkward. You're still family to us. Family. That word hit harder than I expected. Eventually I agreed. And that dinner changed everything. Because when I walked into their house that night, Jenna wasn't there, but her father was. And the way he looked at me when he opened the door told me he knew exactly what his daughter had done. He shook his head slowly. I'm ashamed of her. Then he said something that would eventually turn my entire life upside down. You deserved better than both of them. At the time, I thought he was just being kind. I had absolutely no idea. That man would eventually become my husband. And technically, Jenna's new stepfather. Walking into Jenna's parents' house that night felt surreal. For almost 10 years, that place had felt like a second home to me. I'd spent Christmas mornings there, birthday dinners, random Sunday afternoons when Jenna and I were bored and decided to raid her mom's kitchen. But now everything felt different. Like I was stepping into a memory that didn't belong to me anymore. Jenna's dad opened the door before I even had time to knock. His name is Robert. Tall, calm, the kind of person who always made everyone feel comfortable. The second they walked into a room, when Jenna and I were teenagers, all my friends thought he was the cool dad. The one who let us stay up late watching movies and always ordered extra pizza. But that night he looked tired. Older somehow. When he saw me standing there, he sighed and shook his head. I'm really glad you came. I gave a small smile. Thanks for inviting me. Inside, the house smelled exactly the same as it always had. Garlic. Bread. Jenna's mom, Carol, rushed over and hugged me immediately. And when I say hugged, I mean really hugged. The kind where someone holds on longer than normal because they know you're hurting. I'm so sorry, she whispered. That was the second time someone had said those words to me. And for the first time since everything happened, my eyes actually stung a little. We sat down for dinner like old times. Except there was an obvious empty seat at the table. Jenna's. No one mentioned her at first. Carol asked about work. Robert asked if I'd talked to a lawyer yet. Eventually, the silence around Jenna became too obvious. So I finally said it. I assume she told you. Robert let out a slow breath. She told us. Her version. I raised an eyebrow. Oh? Carol looked uncomfortable. She said your marriage had been falling apart. I almost laughed. That's funny. It seemed fine until she started sleeping with my husband. The bluntness hung in the air for a second. Robert didn't look shocked, though. He just nodded slowly. That's closer to what I suspected. Carol rubbed her forehead. I raised her better than that. I didn't know how to respond. Part of me felt bad for them. Because no matter how angry I was at Jenna, these were still her parents. And they clearly felt humiliated by what she'd done. Robert leaned back in his chair. Mark's been coming around lately, he said. That made my stomach twist. Oh? Yeah, Jenna brings him over sometimes. I stared at my plate. That must be fun. Robert snorted. Not particularly. Carol sighed. He's very proud of himself. That sounded exactly like Mark. He thinks he won some kind of prize, Robert continued. That sentence made me look up. Robert was watching me carefully. He talks about how everything worked out for the best. The anger I'd been keeping buried flared up again. Of course he does. Robert shook his head. He doesn't seem to realize what he lost. I didn't say anything. Because the truth was, at that point I wasn't sure what I'd lost either. Dinner ended up lasting 3 hours. We talked about everything except Jenna and Mark. It felt weirdly comforting. Like stepping back into a version of my life before everything exploded. When I got up to leave, Carol hugged me again. You're always welcome here, she said. Then she went into the kitchen to pack leftovers. Which left me alone in the living room with Robert. He leaned against the doorway watching me put on my coat. You okay? He asked. I shrugged. Define okay. He nodded slowly. That bad, huh? I hesitated. Then I admitted something I hadn't said out loud to anyone. It's weird. What is? I'm not as sad as I thought I'd be. Robert raised an eyebrow. Really? I mean, it hurts, obviously. But But the more I think about it, the more I realize something. What's that? If Mark was capable of doing something like this, maybe I didn't know him as well as I thought. Robert considered that. People surprise you sometimes. Yeah. Then I added quietly, sometimes in really disappointing ways. He studied me for a moment. Then he said something that caught me off guard. You're handling this better than most people would. I laughed softly. Oh, trust me. I'm not that mature. He smiled slightly. Still, there was a pause. Then he asked, what are you going to do now? I didn't have a clear answer yet, but I did know one thing. I'm not going to let them ruin my life. Robert nodded. Good. Then he said something that felt oddly important at the time. Because people like Mark always assume the person they hurt will stay broken. That sentence stuck with me. Because he was right. Mark absolutely believed that. Before I left, Robert walked me to my car. It was cold outside. The kind of night where your breath turns into little clouds in the air. Thanks for dinner, I said. You're welcome anytime. Then he hesitated. Actually, what? You should come by again next week. I blinked. Really? Carol likes having you around. I smiled. I like being here. And that was the truth. Being around them didn't feel awkward. It felt grounding. Like I still had people on my side. So I came back the next week. And the week after that. Sometimes Carol was there. Sometimes she had evening plans and it was just Robert and me having dinner. At first, we mostly talked about normal things. Work, movies, news. But slowly the conversation started getting deeper. One night we ended up talking about relationships. Robert had been divorced for years. Marriage is complicated, he said while pouring us both a glass of wine. That's one word for it. He chuckled. My ex-wife used to say something interesting. What? She said you don't really know someone until you see how they behave when they have power. Power? Yeah, money, status, control. He took a sip of wine. People reveal their real character when they think they've won. That sentence made me think about Mark. About how smug he'd looked lately. About how confident he was that everything had gone his way. Robert noticed the look on my face. Thinking about him? Unfortunately. Still hurting? Not exactly. Then what? I stared at my glass. Then I admitted something surprising. I think I'm starting to feel angry. Robert nodded. That's normal. But it's not the kind of anger where you scream. What kind is it? The kind where you start planning things. He studied me carefully. Then he smiled. Now that's interesting. That was the first moment I realized something about Robert. He wasn't just kind. He was smart. Very smart. And over the next few weeks, we started spending more and more time together. Dinner turned into long conversations. Conversations turned into inside jokes. Inside jokes turned into something else. Something neither of us expected. Because one night, about 3 months after Mark left me, Robert looked at me across the table and said something that changed everything. I think I'm starting to like you more than I should. And the crazy part? I realized in that moment, I felt the exact same way. But what none of us realized yet was how catastrophic that would be for Jenna and Mark. Because the day they found out was the day their perfect little relationship started falling apart. The first time Robert admitted he liked me, the room went completely silent. Not awkward silent, just stunned. I stared at him across the dining table like I'd misheard him. You're joking, I said finally. He shook his head slowly. No, that made my brain short-circuit a little. Because Robert wasn't just some random guy. He was Jenna's father, my ex-best friend's father. The father of the woman currently living with my ex-husband. Which meant the situation was complicated, to say the least. I don't think that's a good idea, I said carefully. Robert nodded like he expected that answer. It probably isn't. Your daughter would lose her mind. He laughed softly. She lost the right to have opinions about your love life when she started dating your husband. Fair point. Still, I hesitated. This could get messy. Robert leaned back in his chair. Everything is already messy. Also fair. For a few minutes, we just sat there quietly. Then he said something that caught me off guard. You know I'm not talking about some revenge thing, right? What do you mean? I'm not trying to get back at Jenna or Mark. He met my eyes. I genuinely enjoy being around you. Something about the way he said it felt sincere. And that was the problem. Because up until that moment, everything about my situation had been ugly. Betrayal. Lies. Gaslighting. But Robert had been kind. Steady. The one person who hadn't treated me like I was the problem. I enjoy being around you too, I admitted. There was a long pause. Then he said, so what do we do about that? I laughed nervously. I have absolutely no idea. For a while, we did nothing. Life went on. We kept having dinner. Kept talking. But neither of us crossed that line. At least not immediately. That changed one night about 2 weeks later. Robert had invited me over for a movie. Carol was visiting her sister that weekend, so it was just the two of us. Halfway through the movie, I realized something. Neither of us was actually watching it. We were just sitting there, aware of each other. Finally, Robert muted the TV. Okay, he said. This is getting ridiculous. I smiled. A little? He turned toward me. Can I ask you something? Sure. Are you avoiding this because of Jenna? That question made me pause. I guess. Partially. And the rest? I thought about it for a second. The rest is because it feels insane. Robert chuckled. That's fair. You're literally the father of the woman my husband left me for. Technically ex-husband. Soon. He shrugged. Still. I sighed. Imagine the family tree. Yeah, he admitted. It's not ideal. We both laughed. Then he asked something that surprised me. Do you want to go on a date? My brain froze. A date? Yes. With you. I stared at him. You're serious? Very. Robert, if the answer is no, that's okay. He said it calmly, like he genuinely meant it. But the truth was, I didn't want to say no, because somewhere along the way, something had shifted. Robert made me feel calm, safe, seen. Things Mark hadn't made me feel in a long time. So after a long pause, I said something that probably changed all of our lives. Okay. His eyebrows lifted slightly. Okay? Okay. And just like that, everything started moving forward. Our first date was surprisingly normal. Dinner at a quiet restaurant across town. Wine, conversation. No drama, no awkwardness. Just two people enjoying each other's company. By the end of the night, Robert walked me to my car. You know this is going to cause chaos eventually, he said. I smiled. Everything already did. He laughed. Fair point. Then he leaned down and kissed me. And that's when things became very real. The next few months were surprisingly peaceful. Mark and Jenna were busy playing house together. Meanwhile, Robert and I were building something that actually felt stable. We kept the relationship quiet at first. Not secret, just private. But secrets have a funny way of revealing themselves. Especially when the people involved are dramatic. Which Jenna definitely was. The first time she found out about us was spectacular. It happened about 6 months after Mark and I separated. Robert and I were having lunch at a small cafe downtown. We were sitting outside enjoying the sun, talking about nothing important. Then I noticed someone across the street. Someone staring at us. Jenna. She looked like she'd just seen a ghost. For a moment, she just stood there frozen. Then she stormed across the street. What the hell is this? She demanded. People at nearby tables started staring. Robert stayed calm. Hello, Jenna. She pointed at me like I was contagious. Why is she here? I raised an eyebrow. Nice to see you too. Her face was turning red. You're on a date with my father? Robert answered calmly. Yes. Jenna looked like her brain couldn't process the information. You're joking. No. She turned to me. You're doing this to get back at me. I took a sip of my drink. Honestly, I wasn't thinking about you at all. That made her even angrier. You're insane. Robert sighed. Jenna. What? You lost the right to judge anyone's relationship choices. She stared at him in disbelief. Are you serious right now? Very. Her voice rose an octave. You're choosing her over your own daughter? Robert's expression hardened slightly. I'm choosing to spend time with someone who treats people better than you did. That shut her up for about 3 seconds. Then she did what Jenna always did when she felt cornered. She called Mark. 20 minutes later, Mark showed up. And the moment he saw me sitting next to Robert, his entire face went blank. What is happening? He asked slowly. Jenna pointed at us dramatically. They're dating. Mark blinked. Then he looked at Robert. You're serious? Robert nodded. Yes. Mark let out a small, disbelieving laugh. This is some kind of joke. No. He looked at me. You can't be serious. I shrugged. Life surprises you with the love you didn't expect. The exact caption Jenna had used months earlier. Mark's jaw tightened. And that was the moment I realized something interesting. For the first time since the divorce started, he looked uncomfortable. Really uncomfortable. But the chaos that followed? That was only the beginning. Because what none of them expected was what happened a year later, when Robert got down on one knee, and I said yes, which meant I was about to become Jenna's stepmother, and technically, Mark's stepmother-in-law. When Robert proposed to me, the first thing I did wasn't scream, cry, or jump into his arms. I stared at the ring. Then I laughed. Not because it wasn't romantic, it actually was. Robert had taken me to a quiet overlook outside the city, where you could see all the lights at night. But the situation was so absurd, my brain needed a second to catch up. You're laughing, he said. I'm trying to process the family tree. Robert chuckled. That bad? Let me think, I said, counting on my fingers. If I marry you, I become Jenna's stepmother. Correct. And since she's dating my ex-husband, technically yes. That means Mark's girlfriend's stepmother is his ex-wife. Robert grinned. When you put it like that, it sounds complicated. Complicated, I said. It sounds like a reality show. Then I looked back at the ring. Are you sure about this? Robert didn't hesitate. Yes. Something about that certainty made my chest feel warm. Because after everything that happened with Mark, I'd forgotten what it felt like to be chosen without hesitation. So I said yes. And that's when the real chaos started. Robert insisted we tell Jenna in person. Better she hears it from us, he said. I agreed. Mostly because I was curious to see her reaction. We invited her to dinner at her parents' house. She arrived with Mark, which was convenient. The moment they walked in, Jenna immediately looked suspicious. Why are we all here? Robert poured himself a drink. We have news. Mark leaned against the wall casually. Good news or weird news? Robert glanced at me. Then he said it. We're getting married. For a moment, neither of them reacted. Like their brains hadn't processed the words. Then Jenna blinked. What? Robert repeated it calmly. I proposed to her? Jenna looked at me like I'd personally set her house on fire. You're kidding. No. You're serious? Yes. Her face turned red instantly. This is disgusting. Robert sighed. Jenna, you're my father. And she's an adult. You're doing this to embarrass me. I couldn't help myself. You dated my husband. She spun toward me. That's different. Is it? Mark finally spoke up. Okay, hold on. He looked genuinely confused. You're actually going through with this? Robert nodded. Yes. Mark laughed awkwardly. This is insane. Coming from you, I said. That's hilarious. His jaw tightened. But he didn't respond. Jenna started pacing. This is messed up. People are going to talk. Robert shrugged. People already talk. You're humiliating me. That sentence made something click in my head. Interesting, I said. What? You didn't seem too worried about humiliating me when you moved my husband into your apartment. Her mouth snapped shut. Mark muttered, this is pointless. But Robert stood firm. The wedding will be small. Jenna stared at him in disbelief. You actually expect me to come? That's your choice. She looked like she might explode. Mark grabbed her arm. Let's go. They stormed out of the house. The door slammed behind them. Robert looked at me calmly. Well, that went about how I expected. We had the wedding 6 months later. Small ceremony. Close friends. Family. And yes, Jenna came. But not because she wanted to. Carol convinced her. You'll regret missing your father's wedding, she told her. So Jenna showed up. With Mark. And I will never forget the look on her face when I walked down the aisle. Pure disbelief. The entire ceremony she sat stiffly in the front row while I married her father. When the officiant said, I now pronounce you husband and wife, I caught Jenna staring at me like I'd just rewritten the laws of physics. Which technically I had, because from that moment forward, I was officially her stepmother. Now here's the part Mark never saw coming. Remember how I handled most of our finances during our marriage? Well, that came up during the divorce. Turns out Mark had been a little too confident about our money situation. Because several investments were actually in my name. Not intentionally, just because I was the one who set them up. By the time the divorce finalized, I walked away with a lot more than he expected. Meanwhile, Robert was extremely successful. Far more successful than Mark ever realized. Which meant my life after the divorce looked very different from what Mark predicted. New house. Financial security. Peace. Meanwhile, Mark and Jenna? Not so much. Because once the excitement of their relationship wore off, reality hit. They fought constantly. Mark hated how dramatic Jenna was. Jenna hated that Mark wasn't as exciting as she thought. And the best part? They had to see me at family events. As the woman sitting next to Jenna's father, her stepmother. About a year after my wedding, Mark asked to meet for coffee. Curiosity got the better of me, so I agreed. He looked tired. Older. Like the last couple of years had worn him down. After a few minutes of awkward small talk, he said something I didn't expect. I made a mistake. I raised an eyebrow. Oh? Leaving you. I took a sip of my coffee. That's unfortunate. He sighed. I thought Jenna and I were meant to be. And now? He rubbed his face. She's exhausting. I laughed softly. You didn't notice that before? I thought you were the problem. That sentence made me smile. Funny how that worked out. He looked at me carefully. You seem happy. I am. He nodded slowly. I didn't think you'd bounce back like this. That's because you underestimated me. He stared at the table for a long time. Then he said quietly, You really won, didn't you? I thought about that. About everything that had happened. Then I shook my head. This wasn't about winning. Then what was it about? I stood up and grabbed my purse. It was about realizing I deserved better. Then I paused. And the funny thing is, if you and Jenna hadn't betrayed me, I smiled slightly. I never would have met my husband. And with that, I left him sitting there. Because the truth was, Mark thought he'd stolen something from me. But in the end, he'd only removed himself from a life he never deserved to be part of. And honestly, that turned out to be the best thing that ever happened to me.